Okay, hey everyone. We are going to get started with our webinar session today. We are going to be talking about the power of relationships in youth development and engagement. So really coming to understand how youth and adults can work together and grow together as a team. So let's get started. A little bit about me to start off. My name is Jamie Sierfeld, and I am the director of the Lindsay Meyer Teen Institute, or LMTI. My background is in counseling and human services. I've been involved with youth leadership and alcohol, tobacco, and other drug prevention for just about 20 years now, so it's been a while, but I actually did get involved with this when I was a teenager, so it's been even more than 20 years. So I kind of have grown up with these concepts of youth leadership and have been able to see them play out in my own life. And now I get the pleasure of seeing them play out in the lives of hundreds of youth that we work with through the Lindsay Meyer Teen Institute every year, which is a pretty awesome thing. I have 4 kids. They span in ages from 4 all the way up to 17, so dealing with many ages, many stages, so I feel like I get to see this stuff play out in my own life as well, which is interesting to see how these theories hold up in my own family as well, because there's definitely some crossover, some things that don't cross over, but some things definitely do. So we can talk about that a little bit too. Just a couple of fun facts. I love golden retrievers. That is my very adorable golden retriever right there. Her name is Rosie. And I don't like house centipedes at all, so much that I will not even put them fully on the screen. You can see them poking out from behind the little red X. If you don't know what house centipedes are, consider yourself lucky. If you have them, like I do in my basement, I feel your pain and I'm sorry. But let's dive right into this presentation. So a little bit about the Lindsay Meyer Teen Institute, or LMTI as we call it. Our mission is to guide young people to realize their leadership potential and become empowered to create positive changes in themselves, in their schools, and in their communities. So the way we go about this is we provide lots of different training opportunities and experiential learning opportunities for youth throughout the year. Our biggest program and our longest running program, which has been around for over 30 years, is our Summer Leadership Conference, which is for high school students. We take youth from all over the state of New Jersey and we bring them together for a 5-day overnight conference at a camp where we talk about different leadership skills. We talk about different issues that are important for high school students to learn more about and to contribute to kind of like solving and working on. We talk about action planning, we talk about communities, we talk about so many different things, all with this goal of really helping youth reach their potential and realize that they have so much to contribute because of the person that they are. And everything that we do as far as skill building is just stuff that we can add to their inherent worth and value, which is awesome to see kind of play out. In addition to our summer conference, we also hold custom leadership trainings for youth and for adults on a wide variety of topics. You name it, we can probably present on it because there's so many topics that are just relevant for youth and adults to learn about when it comes to these topics of leadership and of working with youth organizations or just working with youth in general. We also run many regional, statewide, and other specialized leadership conferences, county-based ones. We run conferences for athletes, all sorts of different things. So we really have a lot of experience with providing different training opportunities for different audiences. Okay. Next, we have the goals of this session. So in talking a little bit more about what we're going to actually be getting into today, what we are going to be doing is trying to come to understand this importance of youth and adult relationships as we're engaging youth. And why is that balance so important as we work with youth in our schools and communities? We're also going to understand the importance of the role that youth can play in prevention programs, in community organizations, in coalitions, and why we really need youth at the table in all of those settings. We're also going to learn a little bit about the theories so that we can understand it all, but also learn some practical applications and activities so we can understand how to make this all happen, and hopefully make it fun too, because when we're working with youth, we definitely need to approach things from a different angle sometimes. And for adults too, we're all kind of tired of learning in the same way as well. So I think, this presentation is geared towards how we can work with youth, but I also think there's a lot of takeaway for how we can work with adults as well, and just how we can connect and communicate with one another. So the big question here, why is it so important to engage youth? What does it add to your group, organization, your coalition, or your event, and what does it do for youth? Well, before we can get to that, we have to kind of talk about what is youth engagement. But before we even get into what youth engagement is, I want to get into what youth engagement is not, because that I think is important to say right at the get-go, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what it means to engage youth. So these are just a few of my favorite that I've seen over the years. So the first thing, youth engagement is not an obligatory or honorary seat at our table because it's required or because it sounds like something we should do. Okay, so we all have different grant requirements or different organizational codes that we have to deal with, and a lot of them have a little box that says a youth must be part of this process. And so I know we want to check off that box, but checking off that box is not enough. There's no point in bringing youth to our table if we're not going to actively involve them in whatever is going on around that table. It's a waste of our time, it's a waste of their time. And frankly, if we're going to involve youth, we want to do it in a way that it adds value for them and for us. So don't just do it because you have to. Okay, this is a favorite of mine. Youth engagement is not just about giving youth pizza at your meetings, though they will eat it. I think that this is one of my favorite things. I've sat in a lot of meetings and discussions where people are like, well, how will we get youth to come to our meetings? And everybody's like, just give them pizza, they'll come. Kids are always hungry, teenagers always want to eat. That is very true. And likely if you provide food, people will be super grateful for it, and you definitely should continue that if it's something that is helpful for the youth that you're working with, if it's something that's getting them there. But that should not be like your sole motivation, like, come, we have pizza. Hopefully, if that's something that gets them in the door, that's okay, but hopefully the value that you're adding to their lives through your program or your event or your activity will get them beyond pizza. So not all about pizza. Okay, this is another fan favorite. Youth engagement is not about using funky fonts to convey your youthfulness and your relatability. I have seen a million presentations that resort to using like Comic Sans font to show that this is for youth and we're youthful and we know what we're talking about because we, clearly can present a PowerPoint presentation or a Google Slides presentation with youthful fonts. That means very little to youth. Youth are so perceptive, and just because you're using a font that looks a little bit more fun, that doesn't mean that we're really getting to something that adds value to youth. So just a few things right off the bat that we want to make sure that's not what we're doing or what we're talking about. So what youth engagement is, okay, and I really like this. These definitions here, they come from ACT for Youth Center for Community Action, and you can look that up. I'll have the resources at the end so you can kind of find a little bit more. But I like these definitions because I think they're pretty straightforward, and I think that for some of these concepts, the more straightforward we can be, the better, because that just makes it more tangible and make it seem like it's not such a foreign or thing or a concept we have to be afraid of, especially if we're not people who have worked with youth before. I assume most of you who are listening to this have some experience with working with youth and are probably looking for maybe some new ideas or some different ways to engage youth. But for those who haven't worked with youth and are maybe just checking this out because you don't know what to do, we'll try to make this as relatable as possible as we go through so that it's stuff that's easily implemented and not at all scary. So what youth engagement is. Youth engagement is the result when young people are involved in responsible, challenging actions to create a positive change. So a few keywords jump right out to me there, and that's being involved in challenging actions and creating positive change. Okay, if we're just giving youth something that is run-of-the-mill, ordinary, not challenging, it's probably not going to captivate them. It's not going to hold their attention. And when we are talking about youth engagement, we really almost are always working towards some positive change, whether that's a positive change that our coalition or our group or our organization is trying to work towards. If the group is itself a youth group or a youth organization, maybe the positive change is something that they're working on, but whatever it is, there's some sort of end that has a positive change. So this means that it is essential that youth are involved in the planning and in the making decisions that affect themselves and others. So youth engagement cannot be simply us as adults handing youth a script and saying, here you go, do this. You know, it's not adults saying, these are the problems we see in our school and in the community. Can you go fix them for us? Or we're going to fix them for you, and we're going to, you know, have you here to let us know if we're doing okay. It is really about youth doing the work and making the decisions. Youth engagement happens in youth-adult partnerships that are structured so that both groups contribute, teach, and learn from each other. So there is this balance in youth engagement where youth and adults are on the same level, and that's a little bit different than other you know, relationships that adults might have had with youth in the past. Adults really are trying to elevate youth so that they feel and understand that they have this power and ability right now to be meaningful contributors to society, however that's defined, whether that's their school society or community, whether that's the larger society, whether that's a small group that they have in their school, whatever that definition is, youth have that ability right now. And adults are there to guide them in that process, to help them, but they're not there to make the decisions for them. And that's really important in youth engagement because we want youth to feel as though they're the ones doing this, because that's how they learn and grow best. So a couple definitions, because these words are going to come up quite a bit. So the first word here we have is, or phrase rather, we have is positive youth development. And positive youth development is an approach that emphasizes these principles. First, there's a focus on strengths and positive outcomes. So this is different, might be different for some of you, because oftentimes we're looking at like what the problems are and kind of like a deficit-based approach. But with positive youth development, we're looking at communities intentionally helping young people build on their strengths and develop more protective factors and more competencies, values, and connections so that they can thrive. And that's not just in their, you know, work with your group or organization or club. That's for life. So we're trying to build skills here through positive youth development that they can carry with them beyond youth as well. So positive youth development also involves youth voice and engagement. And we're going to get into youth voice in a minute. But that means that youth are valued partners in this process. They are meaningful, they can be decision makers, and they can have significant roles in all of our work. For positive youth development, we use strategies that involve all youth, okay? This is not about bringing in the kids who are on the honor roll and just working with them, or bringing out the kids who we put in a box as being high-risk kids or kids that need extra help. This is an approach that all kids can benefit from. And we really want to make sure that we are involving all youth in this process. The groups that I have seen be most successful are the ones that really do a good job of pulling everybody in, because that's the way to have the biggest impact. These qualities, these things that we're instilling in youth are universally beneficial for them. You don't have to be a kid who's an A+ student to be the only one who can benefit from this, or a kid who's, you know, struggling to get C's. Everybody in between can benefit from what we're doing here with youth development. You take from it, you know, what you need and grow from it in the way that, you know, benefits you. Positive youth and development also involves community development, involvement rather, and collaboration. So this is really about getting involved in what's happening around us. It's about the programs we're running, but it's beyond that. It's about how can we make this process become something that's going to create real change and have some sustainability and have some role in making the places we live better, the world we live in better. So really having some sort of impact beyond just what we're doing. And it also involves really getting youth involved, I think, with that community process of looking at the different sectors of the community and understanding that youth are one of those sectors, right? We talk a lot in coalition building about bringing all of those sectors to the table, right? So the representatives from school, representatives from the government, representatives from, religious organizations, the police department, all of those things. Youth are part of that too. So when we talk about positive youth development, we want them involved in that process as well, because we want to help them see how they fit into that puzzle. And it's a long-term commitment. We're in this for the long haul with youth. We're not just trying to go through a list of tasks that have to be accomplished for whatever event we're trying to run in town and then say, all right, youth, thanks for your input and help, see you later. This is about really giving youth skills that can help them throughout their childhood and adolescence, but also, again, skills that they can carry over into their adult life as well. Getting on to what youth voice is. Really, youth voice is what it sounds like, but it's more, okay? So it's not just hearing what youth have to say, so their perspectives, their ideas, their experience, their knowledge, their actions, all of that, but really what is essential with youth voice is increasing the quantity and the quality of the opportunities for youth to get that voice heard. So it's really putting us as adults in a spot where we can give youth a platform to use their voice so that they are not just heard, but they have many, many opportunities to get what they're saying and doing and believing and feeling and knowing, all of that is getting out into the world, whether that's our local world or the larger world. And it's really about giving them this opportunity. So it's not just about hearing and listening, it's also about amplifying. So one more definition that is super important is about youth-adult partnerships. And youth-adult partnerships are what they sound like, but they're a little bit different if you haven't worked with youth in this way before. Partners suggest that there's equality, that there's togetherness. So young people and adults are engaged together in their communities. Relationships between youth and adults where there is mutuality in teaching, learning, and action. So if I'm an adult, I'm learning from youth, I'm teaching youth, but they're also teaching me and learning, and the action is, back and forth between both of us because we're in this together. And this is really what distinguishes these relationships, these partnerships, from the more traditional adult youth relationships that you might be familiar with. So think like from a parent-child or a student-teacher or even mentoring. In those, there's kind of an imbalance of, I don't want to say power because it's not about that, but there's definitely an imbalance in authority or in, kind of who's making ultimate decisions and how information is being relayed back and forth. In youth-adult partnerships, we really have this balanced relationship where it's kind of flowing back and forth. And as adults, we are the ones who really have to help facilitate that for youth and model that kind of behavior. And the focus here is really on nurturing youth, emphasizing youth and their contributions rather than pointing out all of their problems. Youth are so tired of hearing about the things they're doing wrong, especially our teenagers. I'm a parent of teenagers and I'm guilty of it as well. it is so much easier sometimes to point out the negative things that our kids are doing, rather than to highlight the positive things. And sometimes we have to dig a little bit more for those positive things, especially when, we're dealing with teenagers who, whose brains aren't fully developed. And so there's impulsivity and there's decision making that isn't fully thought out. That can be really frustrating for any adult who's dealing with teenagers, because we know that they're going to grow out of that part of their life where things aren't as rational. So sometimes we're not as patient as we should be with youth. But in these partnerships, this is a real opportunity for youth to kind of have a respite from that feeling of adults constantly, or the feeling that youth get that adults are constantly telling them what they've done wrong. This is an opportunity for adults to identify and help them identify what they're doing right and how they can build on that. So getting back to our original question, why is it important to engage youth? What does it add to your group, organization, coalition, event, whatever you've got going on, and what does it do for youth? So the thing is, youth engagement is win-win. Young people benefit because they get the skills and knowledge and self-esteem and connectedness and all of these amazing qualities and values and skills that are just essential for thriving. Adults benefit because we get this enhanced competency where we understand youth differently than we might automatically do otherwise if we weren't intentionally working on our relationships with youth. We learn to better understand them and value them, and we increase our own commitment and energies to our organizations by having youth engagement. Honestly, if you are an adult who seriously loves working with youth, and this is for teachers and club advisors and coaches, there's an energy that comes from working with youth that is hard to capture otherwise. I wish that, as I work with adults, that I could capture that energy that youth bring to the table. There is just an enthusiasm that is infectious when you work with a group of youth leaders who are passionate and committed, who are being given the right skills. And, when you get to be an adult who's part of that, it just makes you feel that more committed and energetic to whatever it is you're working on with them. So that's a pretty awesome thing to gain, that I think maybe we don't always think about when we start our job as being a teacher or a coach or whatever it is that we're setting out to be. From an organizational standpoint, we certainly benefit because we improve our programs. We gain community recognition. We attract funders. Okay, these are all the things that I look at as helpful side benefits. Certainly, we want to have good programs. We want to gain community recognition. We want to attract funders because we need all of those things to keep our important work running. But at the forefront is really, what are these engagement opportunities doing for youth themselves? And overall communities benefit because quality of life is improved. We have better coordinated youth services. We're authentically embracing diversity by representing young people, because we can't be culturally competent if youth are not also reflected in, everything that we do in our work. So there is one problem though. Adults often accidentally get in the way of real youth engagement. And this is not, I'm not picking on you adults who are listening to this. I'm just saying, let's get this out in the open. We often fall into the trap of doing things the way that they've always been done because that's the way they've always been done, right? We do that in like a million areas in our lives, and this is no exception. So there's a lot of different ways that we often interact with youth that kind of really prevent us from getting into the realness of youth engagement. So the first thing is that we treat youth as receptacles. We dump all of our knowledge on them without input, right? I think of this as, and this is not picking on teachers, I love teachers, they are essential, they have crafted and molded me into the person I am, and I know so many people who are listening are teachers and who have had teachers who feel the same way, but there, I think, is a traditional model of teaching that is quite archaic, where you just get lectured to as a kid and you get the information, you take the information, and you do the work. And adults know the information, so we are going to give you the information, and that's that. When we do that, we miss a real opportunity to help youth really absorb and learn information. We don't know it all as adults. We might have the information and we might have more experience, but we don't have the experience of youth today. And that makes a world of difference in how youth interpret what we're saying to them and what we're telling them. We can have all the information in the world, but if we don't know the way the world works from a youth perspective, that information is not going to help anyone. So the next one here is youth as recipients. So this is the idea that youth are not able to make or take informed, practical, and powerful choices, right? So youth cannot make choices for themselves. So we're going to do it for them. We're going to make it easy for them. We're going to tell you what to do. You just do it, and that's how we're going to go about it. And that's kind of not fair to youth too, because that's assuming that they're not capable. And what kind of notion are we passing on to our youth if we're telling them that they're not capable? Or even if we're not meaning to say that, but that's the implication. You're not capable of doing this for yourself, so I'm going to do it for you. Many well-intentioned adults do this all the time. We do it as parents all the time because we want to protect our kids, right? We don't want them to come into harm's way, so we're going to do this work for you we're going to do this hard part for you so that you don't have to deal with it and you'll be okay. And now we've sent a message to our kids that they're not able to do it on their own, which is not a quality I think you want youth to take into their adult lives, the thought that they're not capable of doing things on their own, The next thing is, this is one of my favorites because I think this is kind of like this is the empty chair at the table, visual from earlier in the presentation. This is youth as informants. This is recognizing that we know youth know things about youth. So please come sit at our table, tell us about youth, and then leave, And sometimes we need this information, right? I'm not knocking on focus groups and key informant interviews and all those different things we need to do for like needs assessments and things like that. However, when we're talking about real youth engagement, we need to keep them at the table. We don't just bring them to our table and then dismiss them when we've gotten the info we need. We need to keep them there at our table. And beyond keeping them at our table, we need to get them to be leading at our table. What an experience for youth to have, especially when they're working with adults, to actually be responsible for leading things with adults and making them feel as though they're capable to do that. If more youth had that opportunity, I just can only imagine what kind of confident, strong young people we would have, kind of as they move on towards adulthood. And the other thing there is youth as promoters. So this is the idea of youth selling things to other youth. So this is a cool thing. I'm a youth. You'll think this is cool. So it's that idea of it's kind of like using youth, right? And that is definitely not cool as far as I'm concerned. So here's the one thing that's not on here, and this is a very important one, because I think that one of the main ways that adults get in the way without meaning to is that we assume that because we once were teenagers that we know all about being teenagers, so we know what you've been through, teenagers. We were already your age, so we get it. The thing is, though, you were never their age. You really weren't. It's so true. Think about it. You were never their age. You were the number of their age, but you were never their age at this moment in time. You were their age at a totally different moment in time. So just think about all the differences there are, right? Technology, societal shifts, economy, education, politics, life events. There are so many things that shape your life every day, right? But when you think about youth and how impressionable they are and how much they are kind of like building the person that they're going to be, you take those values that you get in your teenage years and you really you know, things morph and change as you get older, but like those are the things that often stay with you, you know? So the things that are happening around teenagers were not happening when you or I were teenagers. They just weren't. Things were different. And here we'll have an example. So we're going to go back in time for a second. So I want you to think of yourself at age 16. All right, so close your eyes, think back. For some of you, this is not that long ago. For some of you, it's a little bit longer. For some of you, like me, it was even longer. But what was the year? Okay, who was your favorite band or singer? What was your favorite TV show? How did you spend time with your friends? What was going on in the country or the world or just in your life? You know, because sometimes for teenagers, the world is your life, right? So here's me at age 16 as an example. All right, there I am in my environmentally conscious t-shirt with a sea turtle, because even though I knew nothing about saving sea turtles, I clearly wanted to convey the message that I wanted to save the sea turtles. You have to love that. Some of my favorite things at age 16, which was 1996, by the way, I loved Nirvana. That was my favorite band. I loved My So-Called Life, my favorite show. I loved Tori Amos. I loved the Delia's catalog. That was where I got all of my clothes. I loved the movie Romeo and Juliet with Claire Danes, because I loved Angela Chase, clearly, from My So-Called Life. She's on there twice. These were the things that made up my world when I was 16. If I showed these to a 16-year-old right now, I have 17-year-olds. They don't know what any of these things are, except for maybe some of the music that I've forced them to listen to over their life. So these things are inconsequential and mean nothing to them, but they could substitute something in each of those categories that have really made a significant impact on them. And that's true of all of us. So let's take a look back. So we have a little timeline here of the Billboard top songs, taking us all the way from Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1970, right up to Kesha's TikTok, and straight on to the #1 song last year, which was, of course, Old Town Road. Okay, so you can see just from something with music, which music touches us all. I really believe that we all hold such powerful memories of music and what it meant in our life at different times. And I find with teenagers especially, they are so, you know, so moved by music. And I know I was too when I was a teenager. I can still listen to those Nirvana CDs. Not that I have anywhere to play the CDs, but if I listened to my Nirvana CDs, it would take me right back to those feelings and emotions that I had. It's true today of teenagers. So there's similarities in the experience, but the interpretation and what's happening around the experience is totally different. Looking at Best Picture, okay, these are the Oscar winners, from Midnight Cowboy all the way up to The Hurt Locker, and then, of course, just this year, Parasite, okay? So the movies shift, the culture shifts, everything impacts all the different things that teenagers are thinking about. We have TV shows, okay? Now, this is an area where we've seen a huge shift because just of how we watch TV shows. You know, back in 1970, we had Marcus Welby, MD, of course, Dallas in the 80s, and Cheers in the 90s, and Survivor, one of my favorite shows, in 2000, American Idol, you know, in 2010, still so popular. And then now with Netflix and Hulu and all of the other networks, we have so many different ways to watch shows that it's almost hard to get a sense of what is the most popular show. But by many accounts, it was Stranger Things 3. So just the way that we're absorbing media is different, right? Oh my gosh, the presidents, right, of our country have been so different over the year. And obviously this is just by decades, so we have a couple missing in there. But you start with Richard Nixon and you go all the way up to Donald Trump, and just think about the political landscape and what was going on during the presidency when you were in high school. You might not even remember, because sometimes, you know, your level of social consciousness might have been different, or not as aware as you are now, or you might have cared about different things, but things are definitely shaped by you know, those who are running the country. And you can see it starting with the 1980s all the way up to 2010 here, you know, a decade ago. These are the different events that shaped our world. You know, no matter what age you are listening to this, I'm sure that there's something on here that impacted the way you think about the world, and probably still does impact the way you think about the world. The thing is, with teenagers today, they didn't live through most of these. Some of them might have been younger, during some of the later things in 2000s, but they haven't lived through some of these other things that maybe were pivotal for a lot of us. And here, if you look at a 16-year-old today, these are the things that they're living with. These are the things that are, around them. Things that are certainly impacting us, but these are the things that are shaping experiences for youth in the same way that events and things happening around us shaped us. So we have to really think about the fact that we were their age, but we were not their age while this stuff was going on. Some of these things were for sure going on. Lots of these things are not new issues. Many of these things have been going on for forever. And maybe there's different levels of awareness now, or that there weren't before. But these are the things that are really shaping the lives of our youth. But if there is one thing that has shaped the lives of youth today, that even if you are an adult who is more recently an adult, I'll say, even if that's the case, the technology that exists today has impacted youth in a way that I don't think anybody could have foreseen, right? There is a saturation of technology that youth today just cannot escape. And that, I think, really has shaped this generation in a way that we couldn't possibly understand. We understand it as adults, but think about being a 16, 17, 18-year-old teenager, and that this is just your life. Like, these things, your phone, your screen, you can't get away from that. You can put it down, but you are so just surrounded by it at all times. There's not a lot of escape from that. You have to be very conscious, I think, and very purposeful about making that decision to escape from it. And for a lot of teens, that is very difficult. I know a lot of adults who have a hard enough time, putting it down. My husband still can't stop playing Candy Crush. And I'm like, I think you're the only person who is still playing Candy Crush, right? So we know firsthand that it's hard, but for youth, they don't know anything else. I read an interesting statistic about this piece. 2012 is really the year that people who research this think of as like where there was a major societal shift, because that was the year when more than 50% of Americans owned a smartphone. And things just shifted at that point. The way that we learn and think and communicate just completely shifted. Teens today differ from even millennials, not just in their views on the world, but just how they spend their time. They have never known a world without the internet or smartphones. And by the way, there have been 25 versions of the iPhone since 2007. So just imagine being a teenager growing up with all of this. And this is all to say that while we can be empathetic to youth, we can never truly understand what youth are going through at this particular moment in time. And that's why it is essential as adults that we listen to them and give them space to be part of all of the solutions that we want to happen, because they bring such a vital voice to to our world. And I often say that youth are not the leaders of tomorrow, because I really feel that. I feel that youth are the leaders today. We just have to sometimes help give them the skills, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be leading today. They have so much to offer. So I think the difference here is there's like a real difference between being connected versus having connection, right? And Brene Brown, and if you haven't read Brene Brown, please go out and read all of her books right now. But she is a professor at the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work, and she specializes in social connection and in researching vulnerability. And she has said that a deep sense of love and belonging is an irresistible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. when those needs are not met, we don't function the way we were meant to. And I love that because it just speaks so much to what youth need, what we all need, but what youth need. And especially in this society where they're so connected, but sometimes they're lacking that connection, we have this amazing opportunity as adults who work with youth to provide that connection where it might be lacking. So now that we've talked all about the background we need, it is time to get into the theories, aka the sciencey stuff. And the first thing I want to say is there are lots of theories, as there are with most things. We have a ton of beautiful diagrams with triangles and ladders and circles and steps and everything else, and these are all super important, and I really like all of them for different reasons. Fletcher's cycle of youth engagement, Bloom's taxonomy, Hart's ladder of youth voice, the stages of psychosocial development, the theory of change, all super important, all relatable here. But the one that I really want to focus on today as we're talking about youth relationships is the Search Institute's Developmental Relationships framework. And I like this because it's all about connection. And I really do believe that connection is the key to really engaging youth. I just think that is the most essential piece. And what this says is that young people are more likely to grow up successfully when they experience developmental relationships with important people in their lives. Developmental relationships are close connections through which young people discover who they are, cultivate abilities to shape their own lives, and learn how to engage and contribute to the world around them. And that's it. That is like 100% what we're trying to do when we engage youth. It's not just about getting them to do a good job in our organization and get the work done. It's really about how can we connect with youth in a way that gives them this really important opportunity that they might not have otherwise had to discover their own strengths, their own abilities, and how can we cultivate and honor and elevate those abilities and skills that they do have and help them develop more. It's really about engaging them in a way that they contribute to our world around us. And the reason why relationships and connections matter so much is that young people who experience strong developmental relationships are more likely to report a wide range of social emotional strengths and other indicators of well-being and thriving. Makes total sense. The more connected we all are, the better off we're going to be. It's that same Brene Brown quote from earlier. We crave connection. We are wired to have it. So youth in particular, as they're growing and developing, they probably need it a little bit more, than other people as well. Young people with strong relationships are more resilient in the face of stress and trauma, okay? And we can't always know about every aspect of the lives of the young people that we work with, but everybody deals with their own sorts of stresses and traumas that they bring from their family life or from their circumstances. And sometimes relationships within family are not as strong as they could be. And, if we are in a place to provide a connection to youth, it really can help make them more resilient in the face of everything that's going on around them. And young people do better when they experience a strong web of relationships with many people. So the more good, solid connections they have with people, the better. And here we have another Brene Brown quote. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. And I love that quote because I really feel that that's what we're doing for youth. We're helping them feel seen, heard, and valued. I said it before, sometimes youth feel so, I think, forgotten. They go from being adorable little kids who we dote on and we love and we give all the attention to, and then as they grow and their emotions start to develop and they feel more complicated, and they start to become a little bit more independent from parents and things like that, I think they start to feel a little bit invisible sometimes. And when we focus so much on the things youth are doing wrong, oh, well, the youth in my town are always out, they're always hanging out at the 7-Eleven in town, or they're always, standing on the corner over there. When we really focus on that, it just makes youth feel like, that they're not valued. So when we can give this opportunity to really show youth that they are inherently valuable and provide them with skills to just build up what's already there, we are doing a great service to youth. And as I said earlier, we're benefiting ourselves too. So getting into some of these aspects of the Search Institute's developmental relationships. So there's basically 5 areas that they have identified that are critical for developmental relationships. And I think there's a lot of things that intersect. So there's certain things that might fall in the express care category that also provide, go in the provide support category. So there's a lot of overlap. And certainly this list is not exhaustive, and it's not the only, the only things that make up good developmental relationships, but I think it's a really good model because it's practical and it's stuff that you can easily adapt to whatever you're doing with youth. So let's get into it. Oh, I also should say, one of the things that we did on our Instagram is we reached out to youth that we work with through LMTI and kind of asked them, like, what did they love about their advisor, their adult advisor that they worked with when they were in high school. So some of these were youth answers, some of these were, our recent alumni. But what was cool is we really were able to pull different quotes that fit into these different categories. And I think it really exemplifies kind of how this works in action. So express care. This is showing me that I matter to you. So be dependable, be someone that I can trust. Listen, really pay attention when we're together. How many times have you been in a conversation with somebody where they're not listening to you? They're looking at their phone, they're looking at the clock, they're, anywhere but with you. And I think one of the things that we all want as humans is to just be heard. I think that's such a basic want that we have. And so youth want it too. So when you make a commitment to youth to be there for them, make sure you're actually listening to them and not just, counting the minutes until the meeting or the session or whatever is over. Believe in me, make me feel known and valued. So important. Be warm. Show me that you enjoy being with me, right? Encourage, praise me for my efforts and my achievements. And what we have from the Instagram here is one of our participants said about their advisor, she's always been my biggest supporter and is always there for me. She's my mama bear. And I love that because clearly that's an advisor who has made it very clear to her student that she works with, her youth leader, that she's there, right? And for youth, that is so important. We need to show up for them, not just because it's our job, but obviously we have to do that if it is our job, but because we want to be there for them. And if you're not there for that reason, youth will know. They are so perceptive and they can see right through so many different things. So be there, for the right reasons. One thing that I think is super important in this area, just for some practical advice, learn names quickly of the people that you're working with, and learn about the youth, okay? So we do a lot of games in LMTI, name games, things to help us remember names, and those are so important because, there's something about somebody knowing your name and saying your name that I really think resonates with all people, especially if it's somebody you just met and they remember your name. That just feels good. It feels like, well, that person took the time to remember who I am. Even better if you learn something about them. And so the first time they come to the meeting, you can find out something about them. You can do an icebreaker where you learn, whatever it is. It can be something silly, it can be something serious. Next time that person shows up, you're able to say, oh, hey Rachel, I'm so glad you came to the next meeting. I remember you were watching Stranger Things. Did you see the latest episode? Whatever it is, like doing that and making that effort really goes a long way with youth. It makes them feel welcome. Don't cancel your meetings, right? If you expect them to be on time, make sure you're on time too. You need to thank youth for their commitment and hard work often, all right? When you want to praise them, make sure that you're being sincere and that you're immediate and you're specific. I think this is so important. If somebody does something good in your meeting, I love to be able to stop and say, whoa, that was awesome. When you did that, it made this person feel this way, and that was so awesome. Thank you for doing that. because now you've expressed to that person what was the thing they did, you've identified the skill, how it made the other person feel, and you've praised them that, and you've told them you value it. So being able to do that is a really important thing to do. So some more ideas for expressing care, okay? And you can see here we have some of our LMTI adult advisors who are doing, this is kind of going out of order here, but we have on the bottom, don't be afraid to be silly. And I really believe this is one of the keys to working with youth. Youth desperately want to be treated like adults, right? We know that from our teenagers. How many times have you heard a teenager say, stop treating me like a child? You know, like every Disney movie probably has a Disney princess saying, I'm not a child, I'm 16 years old, right? And they really want to be treated as adults. We get that. That part of being a teenager has not changed. That's always true. However, youth also, I think, desperately want permission to be able to act like kids. They really do. There's so much pressure for them to not act like kids that when they are given the opportunity to act like kids, they really, there's like a release of expectation and pressure that is pretty awesome to see. And if you're the one who's setting that standard for them and giving them space to be treated as adults, but also acting like kids sometimes, like that's a really beautiful gift, I think, to give youth. Another thing you can do going up from the bottom here is show them your passion. When youth see that you're passionate about something, they are going to feel it. I know when I talk about things at our summer leadership conference, when I talk about things that are like, you know, got to talk about them, the rules, blah, 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 blah. But when I talk about the power of the program and I talk about experience and what you're going to get out of it and what I got out of it, and I can connect it to my own passion, I can see the difference between how people listen to me. So it doesn't matter what you're passionate about. If you can share that with youth, that's another gift that you can give them. It really helps pull them in and keep them engaged in what you're doing. Lots of people in your group are going to have different individual talents and strengths. Utilize them. If you have somebody who's awesome with working with technology, don't ignore that. Bring them in to help you do things with technology. You know, that's an excellent opportunity to, you know, to recognize that they have that individual strength. That shows them that you care that they have it, but it also gives them an opportunity to step into a leadership role. Developing traditions. This is really great for groups. We have one of our LMTI groups who has a Thanksgiving dinner, you know, like Friendsgiving kind of a thing every year. And that's just part of the culture and the tradition of their group now. So they get together every year right before Thanksgiving. They have kind of a potluck dinner. They sit down together. And it's been that way for like 20 years. And it's something that you know, is just part of, it's woven into their own culture of their group. So doing those sorts of things really help people feel like they're part of something. Making new members feel welcome right away. That's so important. You know what it feels like when you're the new person in the room and you don't know anyone and you don't know the expectations and you don't know the way it goes and the format and everything feels weird and awkward. There are things that you can do to make new members feel welcome right away. And one of the first things is really like what we said before, getting to know them, learning their names, introducing them to people, going out of your way to make sure they feel comfortable. Don't ignore people, you know, in that way. Also include different opportunities for learning styles, right? I think this is really important, and it's not something that like outright I think people would think of as showing care, but when you take the time to really adapt what you're doing to make sure that it's connecting with all the different ways that people learn, I really think that that is something that pulls youth in. You know, there's a lot of learning styles out there, but there's not always a lot of adaptation to those learning styles in some ways. I think that there are some kids who are, and adults who are able to just like sit through somebody lecturing to them, and can do that and can take the information in, but there's an awful lot of people who can't learn that way. So, you know, making sure that if somebody is more of a visual learner, you have things that are going to feed their eyes and make them excited, and you have, if you're talking about something, make sure you have an actual like physical thing that shows them what you're talking about. If you have people who learn better by listening, make sure that you have opportunities for them to learn. If you have people who are readers or writers, and that's how they learn. Giving them opportunity to stop before you do discussions, to write down their thoughts first. We call this a Wibbit, and it's from Michael Brandwine, who's an amazing leadership development person, and definitely check him out. I'll put his information at the end of the presentation as well. And he works a lot with camps, and one of the things that we love is the Wibbit, which is write it before you talk. Wibbit. And what that does is it gives everybody a few minutes to collect their thoughts before they share. Some people are really good at just like off the cuff, just being able to say what's on their mind. A lot of people are not. And so this kind of gives everybody that opportunity to really meaningfully contribute to whatever discussions you have going on. There's also people who are kinesthetic and need to move, sitting in a desk all day, at school, and then having to sit down at a meeting or an event that you're running. That's a lot of sitting down, right? So give them things to get up and get moving. Make your activities active. If you're asking questions and they have opinions, don't just ask them. Ask them to move to different side of the rooms based on, how they feel. All of those sorts of things really help keep people engaged. The next one here is challenge growth, okay? And this is the idea of pushing me to get better. It's expecting kids to do their best and expecting them to live up to their potential, right? And I think that this is something that we have to do with youth. We can't just give them the easy tasks because we think they're youth and they can't handle it. We have to expect that when we're developing young leaders, that we give them opportunities to practice being leaders. We can't just expect them to only do the easy things. That's so boring. I wouldn't want to be put in a position where I was always doing the mundane, easy things. It would make me feel like I wasn't trusted or that my input wasn't valuable. Youth would feel that way too. So we also know that without challenge in our lives, we get bored. And when youth are presented with challenging tasks that fit their abilities, they tend to rise to the challenge. They find the activities are more enjoyable and interesting than when tasks are not enjoyable. True for adults as well. And again, this is like the same thing as earlier. Don't just do things for youth. Give them a piece of the action. You will find that youth want to take part of it. They have so many ideas, and they're oftentimes so willing to help. They don't always know how to go about it, and that's where you can step in and really help give them that encouragement and the skills they need to do it. So we have there from our Instagram, we have our advisor. She brings out the best version of me. That's what you want. Whatever that advisor has done probably has something to do with support, but probably also challenge. And making sure that you're reflecting on failures, right? Learning from mistakes and setbacks, all super important. So this was an example that I really liked. I don't know where I was living that I had no idea that this was a thing, but I'm sure many of you know what this is, but this is Biosphere 2, which is in Oracle, Arizona. And I loved it because I was researching for this presentation and I found out about this. And it obviously, you'll see why it fits right in a minute, but I didn't even know that this was a thing that existed. So basically, it's a research experiment that was developed in the late 1980s and early 1990s that recreated Earth's ecosystems, including plants and trees. So there was all of this research done, and scientists found ways to basically recreate ecosystems indoors. So there were all different sorts. There was rainforests and there's deserts and all those different things. And scientists actually lived within them to research, and learn from that experience. So cool. Had no idea it existed. Don't know how I missed it. But one of the really cool things I learned is that while in there, scientists found that trees grew faster indoors than they did outdoors, probably because the environment was a little bit more controlled. But what happened is they would eventually collapse under their own weight before they'd reach maturity. And the reason why they figured out was because there was no wind in the biosphere to produce what's called stress wood in the trees. And this is the type of wood that makes trees more resilient and allows them to be strong enough to live to maturity. So I love this because this is if we take the stress out of the lives of our children, they can't develop their stress wood. They can't develop the means to be resilient. They need to be challenged to become resilient. So we can't just hand them the information. We have to let them learn. We have to let them grow. We can't protect them for everything. They need to develop their stress wood. So it's just a really cool metaphor, I think, for that idea of challenging youth and why it's so important. A couple more ideas for challenging youth. Debrief everything you do, okay? Now, I'm not just talking like, we planned an activity, we went through the strategic prevention framework, and now we're in the evaluation phase and we're going to debrief what we did. That's important, do that. But I'm talking about debrief everything you do. Every time I run a training, I stop after every single activity and talk about why we did what we did. So if it's an icebreaker, right? Almost every youth group out there probably does icebreakers of some point. So it's important for youth to understand why we do icebreakers, okay? It's important for them to do them so that they get those, those skills, and they get the opportunity to get to know other people and to feel comfortable and all those things. But they need to know that's what they're doing also, because that helps them gain that leadership skill. So that's called awareness of process. What are we doing and why are we doing it? So every time you do something with youth, you have an opportunity to really give them this chance to learn about process and why you're doing what you're doing. It gives them so much opportunity to build skill in a way that you probably aren't always even thinking about. So 10 words to live by are what worked, what didn't, what will we do next time, right? So there's observing what people are doing, who did what and why, analyzing the things, thinking about them, figuring out the choices that work best, learning from the things that we've observed so we can try to use new and better skills in the future, right? And if you do this every time you have a discussion with your group, every time you have a meeting, they will gain so much skill just by doing the regular work of your activity that you'll be surprised. Okay, so also with challenge and growth. Wow, this has a lot of things. I must feel a lot about this one because I made many slides about it. Okay, adult concepts are not just for adults, okay? And that is so important for when we're talking about youth development, because we need youth to be able to feel competent, right? And there's no reason why we can't take concepts like, the things I have here are from drug-free communities grants, right? That a lot of you I know probably work with, and it's being part of coalitions, and there's coalition strategies here. And they sound like they're adult concepts, so why would we involve youth in them? They won't care about that, they'll be so bored. They might be, but we can make it relevant for them. We can teach them how this connects to them. We can use language, not dumb our language down, but there is a professional jargon that we often use in our professional little circles that might not translate to youth. It might not translate to other people who don't work in those professional circles. So I think that it's always important to adjust your language when you're talking with different groups of people, right? Tie it into something that they know and that relates to them. And above all, you have to make it fun, okay? And even things like, okay, I don't know why that had a transition in there, but it did. It did. We talk about the strategic prevention framework all the time at LMTI, and in the world of drug and alcohol prevention. And, we use it as a basis for all of our youth prevention planning. It's this series of steps where youth assess community needs, they build capacity, they plan, they implement, they evaluate. Okay, and that is an adult concept, but that is something that we have very successfully been able to teach to youth because we've connected it to why it's important to them, so you can do that with just about anything. Case in point, how many of you are familiar with logic models? I assume you're all raising your hands, and I assume that there's a couple of you out there who are like so excited that we're going to talk about logic models, but I feel that most of you are probably like this, because this is how I think the majority of the population feels about logic models. No matter what area of public health or whatever level of prevention you work in, logic models probably enter your life at some point. But here's what I have had to do. talk about making things relevant and exciting for youth. I once, and I'm not going to give you every detail of this, I'm going to fly through this logic model. I once put together a logic model about Oreos. Okay, oh, this has a lot of transitions, so we'll just go through them fast. So you can see, I'm not going to read through the entire thing, but I went through all of the things that have to do with this Oreo situation, right? And I made it totally relatable to youth, right? I made it funny. I made it, interesting. I told stories. I made a logic model about how I'm not happy with the way Oreos have changed over time. And then I connected it right back to an actual logic model that they needed to create for their group. And this is the logic model that my group created as a result, right? Because I made the concept relatable to them. I made it something that made sense. If I showed them this chart first, this one that's up there right now with all the percentages, and it would be like a foreign language, right? But by taking a step back and breaking it down and figuring out how I could connect it to something that they know about, it was accessible. And that's one of the things that we can do to engage youth, is figure out how to connect this to something that makes sense for them. Okay, so the next piece we have here is provide support. Help me complete tasks and achieve goals. All right, so we see a lot of big words on here: navigate, empower, advocate, set boundaries, right? All of this stuff super important for providing support for the youth that we work with, to help them really get engaged in our process and to develop relationships with them. And I love this Instagram post here. She's always there for me, right? Like that's support, knowing that you have an adult in your life who you can reach out to, who can give you the support that you need to get through whatever it is you're going through. Ideas for providing support: give youth the expertise and knowledge in the field that you have so they can be effective leaders, right? So as adults, we've had more time to gather information, to gather knowledge, to gather experience. Youth have not had that time, but that doesn't mean that they can't be effective leaders. It means that sometimes we have to pass along the expertise and knowledge that we do have. So give them the info they need, or even better, help them acquire the info they need, right? So make activities that aren't just like, here's a handout about the information you need, read up on it. Make activities that get them involved in learning, right? So that the process is part of, of getting that information. Another thing that is really important, and maybe people wouldn't think of this as support, but I really think it is, setting appropriate boundaries, depending on what your setting is, okay? So youth need boundaries. They really do. They don't want them. They love to push them. Teenagers in particular love to push the boundaries. They love to push the buttons. They love to see how far they can get. Toddlers too. I would say that like toddlers and teenagers are the button pusher, boundary pusher ages. I happen to have all of those in my home right now, so I'm really feeling this one. But really, depending on your setting, figure out what your role is in their life and make sure they know that. Are you a mentor? Are you a coach? Are you a teacher? Are you an advisor? What are you? That's really important for youth because they are so trusting. They're easier to victimize. They're less familiar with the resources and their rights, and they are so conditioned to listen to adults. So we don't want to set up a situation that puts them at risk, right? So we want to be very clear with whatever our role is. And so when we're talking about relationships, we're not always talking about like making deep, meaningful connections to last a lifetime, right? That's great, and there are some that do that, but it's really connecting in one of these specific roles, right? So they feel valued, they feel value coming from you in your specific role to them. At LMTI, we talk a lot about the idea of adult advisors, or the adults that work with our youth as coaches. I love that because while they're not teaching them, necessarily like how to dribble a basketball or how to lay down a bunt or something, they're coaching them in other ways. They're giving them skills, they're teaching them skills that they have to practice, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And those are the sort of things that I think coaches do. So when we think about that coach relationship, I kind of like that metaphor for a lot of adults that we have. Setting clear expectations, outlining their responsibilities, right? Like making it clear, like if you're going to be involved in this group, this is what you have to do. Some groups even like have them sign commitment forms, right? That also works for a lot of groups. All right, teaching leadership skills, no matter what kind of group you're involved with. Teaching youth leadership skills is something that you will not regret doing. Now, I think one of the challenges is that people don't always understand that leadership skills can be taught. So we talk a lot about, I hear a lot of people say like, oh, well, so-and-so is a born leader. They're a born leader, you know, and I really try to debunk that through LMTI, because I don't think there is such a thing as a born leader. And I think when we say that, we like make people feel like they're not adequate to lead. And you're really cutting off quite a bit of potential leaders when you do that. I certainly think that there are some leaders who have qualities or personalities that we connect more with being a leader. But I think that there's ways to teach those skills. And again, Michael Brandwine, who is amazing and has so many amazing books that, again, a lot of them are about camp leadership, but they just apply to everything. Please read all of his books. He's awesome. You know, this is a lot of what he speaks of. And so when you talk about practicing leadership skills, you can do it, because just like, think about it in terms of another thing that has like tangible skills you would teach somebody, like a plumber, right? So there are no born plumbers, right? Like we have this little kid down here. He wasn't born doing that, you know, he's been taught. And it's the same thing with leaders. You're not born a leader. You are taught how to be a leader, or you have experiences that make you more likely to be a leader. And we can provide those experiences and those opportunities to practice the skills. So if you're teaching somebody to be a plumber, you teach them the skills of plumbing. You teach them how to unclog a drain. You teach them that you do lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. You teach them how to do other things plumbers do that I don't know about, obviously. It's the same with leaderships. We teach the skills of being a leader. And the way we do this is we identify what those skills are, what we want to teach, and then we practice them. We practice what we call the do-say, right? What do leaders do and what do they say? If you think of someone that you consider to be a great leader, what do they say that lets you know they're a great leader, right? And what do they do? We make youth do this all the time because it's so important when you're teaching leadership skills that you help youth identify what makes a leader, you know, and give them opportunities to practice. And these are a lot of leadership skills that we feel at LMTI are the things that we want our youth to have. And you have the opportunity by engaging youth to give them chances to practice all of these things. We also need to share power with youth, and this is critical when we're talking about youth engagement and about building healthy relationships with youth. Treat youth with respect and give them a say, okay? Take them seriously, treat them fairly. This is not a relationship where you are telling youth what to do, where you are giving them a list of tasks and telling them to complete it. It's just not like that. That's not what sharing power is about. It's working together. It's having that balance. It's giving youth the opportunity to lead, letting them lead, take action, make mistakes, astound you, do all of those things, right? So there's so many opportunities. And our Instagram person here says our advisor always lets us run meetings and make decisions. We learn so much this way. Also, when you don't have to run a meeting, it's one less thing for you to do. So it's like a double win, because your youth is getting the chance to practice and you don't have to plan as much. So I mean, that's that right there in itself, right? So when we share power, there's so many different ways you can do it. Let youth be in charge of different parts of your meetings. Let them run icebreakers, right? Let them be in charge of talking about what happened at the last meeting. Let them do the rules, whatever it is. Let them be in charge of like handing out supplies. Everybody should be doing something, right? There's nothing that is part of your meeting probably, or your event or your activity, that youth can't do, or at least be a very active part of, okay? Let them be in charge of the big tasks. Let them talk to the principal about getting permission for whatever thing you want to do. Don't you do it. Maybe you might have to help set up the meeting or whatever. That's what adults do, right? They open the doors for youth so they can do it. Let them be the one to make the email that's going to go out to all the teachers about the activity. Whatever it is, lean on the skills that they have and let them do it. There's so many opportunities for returning members to teach or mentor new members, right? Let them show the ropes. Let them teach a skill of the day. Identify some of those leadership skills and give them the opportunity to teach other youth how we're going to practice it. Let everybody vote on your ideas, right? Everybody has a say. Let them lead discussions so many different ways, right? So the final piece of the relationships framework here is expanding possibilities. And this is the idea of connecting youth with people and places that broaden their world. So going beyond themselves, going beyond your little group, beyond your school, beyond your community, and really connecting them to how this, whatever they're doing, has a greater impact. So inspiring them to see the possibilities of the future. So really letting them know that they can do great things and that you can help them connect to those things. Expose them to new ideas, new experiences, new places. Connect and introduce them to people who can help them grow. Our Instagram user here said she was very motivated and always ready for something, right? So as an adult advisor, an adult working with youth, your motivation level helps youth understand so much more that they're capable of bigger things. One thing we do with LMTI is provide advanced leadership opportunities. So if a youth has been through our program as a participant, they get the opportunity to come back and be part of our leadership team, right? We give them true responsibility. In fact, our program could not run without our youth staff. They're just essential. So find ways that you can give advanced leadership opportunities with your youth. Bring them to trainings, conferences, and events where they can absorb information, meet new people, learn from new people, teach other people, and make sure you recognize them for their work, okay? Everybody deserves to be recognized for what kind of work they've done. So whatever that looks like for you, awards, a meeting with the principal, recognized by the town and council, the mayor and council, whatever it is, make sure that they're getting recognized. So in closing here, characteristics of authentic youth engagement, really respect, value. Look at all these words here that are on the screen. You feel appreciated, safe, comfortable, heard. They make decisions. They gain leadership skills. They're partners. They see their ideas realized. They participate in social aspects of their environment. They create change. They make progress. They're experts. And I love that because that really, this is the goal. This is the level you want your youth to get to. And it's not a truly difficult process. It's just rethinking our relationships with youth a little bit and putting these things into practice and really giving youth an opportunity. And I'm so glad that you're somebody who wants to give youth that opportunity because they really deserve it. So I have some resources here so you can feel free to pause and get some of those things. Search Institute, Act for Youth, Guide, which is our friends in Georgia who run a teen institute there. They have some awesome blogs with some really practical ideas. Youth Engagement Toolkit, Brene Brown, Michael Brandwine, tons of really good information that I hope you will check out so you can learn more about youth engagement. If you have any questions for me, again, my name is Jamie from the Lindsay Meyer Teen Institute. We're a program of partners in prevention. All of our information is there, our socials, our website, my email. If there's anything I can do for you, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I thank you so much for tuning in to this webinar. And I hope that this helps you. And please reach out if we can do anything else to help you. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.